Thank you.
We're live.
All right, thank you. I'll call to order the meeting of the City of Salem Bond Oversight Committee for October 26, 2023. Present are Hoy,
Stapleton. Nishioka.
Aaron, Courtright, and staff to be identified as needed. Thank you all for being here. Do we have anybody signed up for public comments? No members of the public other than Courtney, and she doesn't count. Nobody on the line. Okay. Management update items, project updates. Alan, general bond project schedule update.
Great. Josh, you mind putting that into full screen mode up there? So you should have all received a handout. It looks like you did of an updated schedule. I think we passed the original version out at one of our first meetings. So I just wanted to, you can take that with you and have it for reference, but I just kind of wanted to overview where there's been changes. So in rough order of where you see them on the schedule, but maybe not exact. Starting with Marine Drive. I think we've talked about at this meeting before. There is a development occurring called Applegate. It's like a veterans housing, right?
Come and gone and come and gone.
Yeah,
It's back now.
It's back on.
Yeah.
And that's at the northern, towards the northern terminus of the project. And so we are working with that developer and their designer, kind of coordinate and make sure that we build the section of Marine Drive that's required with that development, so that it fits with the overall project out there. So the schedule shows that coordination and construction that should happen next year. For just that little.
Oh, okay.
But nothing else changes with it overall, but just showing that there's a little piece coming out in front with Marine Drive. Bridge rehabs, which is 6, 7, 8, and 9 on the first page of the schedule. Actually, good news there, those projects are progressing, and so construction's been moved up to 2025 for all 4. Silverton Road pavement R&R, the 2025 package. We talked about this last meeting. We added some sewer rehab to that project for old sewer main that really needs rehab. And that means we need to extend the construction on that project over 2 seasons. So it'll start in 25 and wrap up in 26.
And the sewer part of it is not a bond project.
It's not a bond part, but we're moving funds around in the utility to make that happen.
Can I ask you a question? Sure. So the bridge rehabs, those aren't like knocked down and ready to go.
Correct.
They're just
That's right.
making adjustments.
Yeah, any more details on the scope?
Yeah, it's pretty minor, really. We're actually cutting 2 far in most of the bottom. So we just literally cut a line bottom, epoxy.
That's amazing.
And that will remove the load restriction.
I mean, it's more.
Sure. What is the traffic situation look like in those areas during that work?
And could you be sure to speak up so the people online can hear?
Yeah, so there will be 9 codes.
Okay.
That's 1, 2, but have some stuff.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I have a question
Yeah.
as well. Will this help support earthquake subduction zone, or is it just simply load?
Just simply load. It's not a side protector.
Anything else on bridges, bridge rehab? I'm seeing finger pointing, but I'm not following.
Oh, I was asking Aaron to sit up at the table so
Oh.
he can hear. He
Okay, I'm like, Brian, what are you trying to say? I don't understand.
I was trying to give him the signal. So.
Can you help us with the color coding on the different colors?
By year, the colors.
Yeah, so construction is coded by year. So like for the bridge projects, you see how the 2025 is labeled green. And Okay. so wherever there's construction, I think it's meant to match the year. Okay, thanks. Okay, so that was, we talked about bridges, we talked about pavement R&R, Pringle Creek Path. As mentioned in previous meetings, received a grant there, and so we've adjusted the timeline due to the federal requirements and the time frame. They just get pushes out a little bit. The transportation bucket project, so we're moving on to now in your schedule. Of course, those have been, see the big table.
Air is thicker up here at the big table.
Yeah.
Lots more hot air.
Now
Oh,
we're
there you go, there you go.
Transportation buckets, we've just adjusted the schedule there for the criteria and process that were just agreed to council on Monday night. So that's what this reflects. I think we were probably over optimistic when we first developed the schedule, thinking that we'd start with packages every year. So now this represents the 1 to 2 year process to pick our projects and then go on. And we're going to talk about parks, paths, and trails. It's a later agenda item on this meeting, but we've made a similar adjustment to that schedule. It's a matter of probably push out in a similar way once we figure out our criteria for this. Parks playgrounds, which is bottom half of page 2 on the schedule. Still all the same projects, but after some consultation with park staff, reordered some of the work to kind of take care of some of the worst problems first and where our biggest maintenance issues are. And then also,
Can you talk about some of those, or maybe Rob could, or somebody? Like, what are the ones that got, or, I'm sorry,
I think Aaron might be the right guy.
Well,
some that got pushed up and some
the
that
ones
got
I
pushed
got,
back?
3 that I can think of that got pushed up are Riverfront Park,
Got pushed up.
Livingston, and Morningside. Yeah. Those are the 3 that were in the further out years.
What about Riverfront Park got pushed up?
It has some severe damage on some of the structures that have to like be closed off so people won't get injured. And so it's kind of a hard time trying to maintain them safe.
Is it because of vandalism or where?
Old
where?
use,
Where?
It's just
Yeah.
where over the years. It was a really high use.
Yeah.
Playground.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're hoping, Rob may speak to this, but as part of Riverfront Park, there's also a natural play area that's to be developed that's separate from the existing playground.
Mhm.
And so the thought process there would be probably combine those projects. Expand.
So what got pushed out to make room for those projects?
So Clark Creek is towards the back now. McRae, I think, might be another one.
McRae.
Yeah. And Brush College are the 3 that are furthest at the back of the pack.
Okay.
The other change we made here, and this was, we had one point that was made early on. I think we had 3 and 4 playgrounds trying to go in a year, and understanding that the best time to build stuff is also when everybody wants to play on the playground. So we stretch these out to 1 or 2 per year to try to get ourselves in a better situation to coordinate with users. Well, we want to be able to avoid it completely, but hopefully not disrupt so many facilities.
Kind of do those shoulder times.
If things do speed up, is this an area that we can kind of pull forward some things and adjust? Does that make sense?
This is government. That's
I
not how
don't
it
know what
works.
you're doing. Just because I know that this is like one of those things that families can see, touch, feel, and experience, and as they see them getting pushed out, I can hear the sigh. But if we could get them done faster, they would probably be really, really excited about that.
We did, originally, we had some gaps, some that were towards here. Already pulled those up. So we're actually showing completing all playground by so we have seen that, so let's see. There's no way.
Right.
A lot of these will depend on hopefully by the time playground. Equipment.
One more question about Riverfront. Because Riverfront receives top funds, is that just covering the maintenance, or does that help cover some of the repair of the play infrastructure there? Like, are we matching dollars there, or is it purely bond?
Just with the exception of the natural separate.
If I may, so top funds cover some operations and maintenance there, and occasionally cover some capital projects. But the need for that funding exceeds available funding, so sometimes it receives that funding, but we don't have extra top funding to assign there.
But I think the councilor's point is that it's one of, I think, 2 parks that are, or maybe 3 that are eligible for top funds, whereas the 87 other parks aren't eligible for that funding. So it's nice to be able to maximize that in those places and put these other funds that are other parks can avail themselves up.
We
when
do
possible.
have another project in the front, which is for electrical upgrades, and it has top one. It don't have matching, or not matching, but contributing towards it. So I think that's the only top one.
Yeah.
Where is the natural playground going to in the riverfront? Is it right next to the structure playground or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, I'll let Rob answer that.
Rob Romanek, Parks Planning Manager. The Riverfront Park Master Plan identifies a natural play area, which is a rock scramble just to the south of the existing structure, as well as a mound slides, a mound of soil with an earthen slide on it.
Okay,
So that's the master plan shows directly to the south. We may adjust that a little bit.
okay.
Now we have the vendor plaza that has been installed, and they have, when they're in there with their food carts, they have charcoal grills, propane tanks, trash right outside their
That's why I was
cards.
trying to figure out where you.
Yes, so we might be adjusting a little bit to provide some buffer between the play area and the uses.
Is there any chance you could send us a link to view the master plan for that? I think that would be really,
Yeah.
just for me personally, I would really enjoy seeing that.
Yeah, certainly post it on the city's website, and I can give probably a copy link to distribute.
Right, because I cannot find anything else to look like to save my life. So
If you just put it in the search bar, it'll
I
all be
know.
revealed.
it'll hold the tens of thousands that you don't need, that you were not looking for.
Yeah. All.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the agenda for Swan the other night, and I'm like, oh, I don't need the one from 2018, but I would love the one from 2023. Anyway, we digress.
Anyone parks? I totally want to play on the dirt slide.
Looks like Bob has something. Yes. Bob.
And this is Mike's question, but I'll ask it anyway. I still see the construction for all the parks starting June, July, August. So is there something about how you stage those that's going to minimize the conflicts? Yeah.
I mean, like Alan said, there's gonna be conflicts with the park users. With tech construction, we have to do this concrete for the excavation that has to occur, which is not ideal in a wet, soggy environment. So what we've tried to do, or what we're trying to do at other places like Minto, for example, we're trying to hit those kind of buffer windows before the peak summer and then maybe in the fall after school started, and so there's down. But again, those timeframes are pretty difficult to hit because you have that spring or a wet fall. And then if you wait for that, even if it's wet, if you've lost all that time. So it's something that we're going to have to try to, as we further our design along and actually know what we need to construct and how we try to do that.
I think that's why we've shown extending those clear through the end of the year, right? So that we can work into that fall stage.
So these timelines, what I'm hearing you say is that even though right now it says the specific months, those could be adjusted as we get closer to those years. You'll be making refinements. Okay, yeah, Counselor.
I think, Rob, this might be for you. Will you be posting signs well in advance that there's going to be construction with anticipated dates so that people that frequent them will know that they may not be able to?
Yeah, when it comes to construction education, I can't speak to that, but I'll just say that we're going to do outreach with the community to help design the playground. So we're going to community conversation about the improvements, and then that will transition into construction notice.
And you'll be notifying the neighborhood associations of that contribution of design so that they can get the word out.
Correct, because it's an urban park and it's the whole community will be, our outreach will be focused on the entire city.
Great, thank you very much.
Quick question, or actually comment maybe, is that I'm going to assume it was intentional that the way you staged out the construction on the park here, you're not working in two parks in one sort of park area. And we hope that if there are changes in the future, that we also take that into account, continue to take that into account.
Yes, we got it at the end. Any other parks playground question? So another parks project where there's a little bit of a change is Minto Brown parking lots. That's the one where we jumped on design the soonest and the fastest that we could. But we did a couple items. One is we had to go through a full RFP or consultant record RFP process to get a designer on board. So we didn't have them on board until the spring, right? It was like February, maybe March. Yeah, before design began. And then discovered some buried debris in one of the parking lots that we had to adjust to and figure out how we're going to handle. Bottom line, that squeezed our ability to get into the fall construction window, and it was going to be really tight and probably not conducive to getting great bids and or leaving ourselves out there in the middle of construction as wet weather occurs and we're vulnerable to flooding and things like that that happen out there. With a facility that gets used a lot, even during off weather.
There isn't really downtime there.
No, there's not. So what we've done is said, instead, let's just make sure we get a good solid package together. We're going to get it out for bid right after the first of the year, correct? So that as soon as weather gets to a contractor can get out there and start working, knowing that we've got backstop of good summer weather coming and hopefully get the project completed as fast as we can in 2024. So that's what the schedule shows now, is that early 2024 through summer construction.
Okay. Anything else on parks?
I think they'll take that parking lot improvement whenever they can get it.
I know
Yeah.
we've had several questions like,
I thought this was
This
happening.
is coming, when's it gonna come? So we know everybody.
Our city council has been promising it.
Yeah.
What's
I'm
going on?
ready.
And then the last one I wanted to highlight is fire stations. So with the funding discussions that are going on that surround the general fund and the fire department, and talking to Chief Niblock, he did not want to get started for sure on designing a new station until those discussions are resolved. And Station 8, which is the one that we have funding in the bond to replace, is also a candidate that could be closed. In some of these options that we're looking at. So essentially, we've pushed those projects back a little bit. This says kind of a placeholder for now until those discussions resolve.
About land purchase.
Land purchase is still shown, so site selection is still shown going on right now, and I know they have started some initial discussions there, and I've encouraged that if there's a good opportunity, we've got the bond funding. We should lock up the parcels if there's a good candidate out there, because they won't get any less expensive over time.
I know, don't do it. Hold your
Don't do it.
tongue.
Let's move on.
Okay, that's all I have on schedule, unless there's other questions.
I know I'm growing as a person.
All right. Transportation, the Gilchrist construction update. Alan, that's you again.
That's me, and then you'll be done with me for a while. So just a quick update here on the Gilchrist. The good news is construction on phase 1 is underway. They've gone out and done some initial clearing and utility works getting underway. You can see some pipe installation happening there. Right-of-way acquisitions are nearing completion for all phases. Obviously, they're done for 1. We're out there, they're doing that work, but for 2 and 3, we're getting to the end of those as well. And we have our designer on board for both phase 2 and 3 OTAC. And so they're going to begin final design of those shortly here as well. So progress on the Gilchrist.
Yeah, I had one other thing to add. Julie Warnick, you shared with me yesterday, that's gas.
Julie Hanson.
Thank you, Julie Hanson. 2 public meetings in a row, I didn't get that right.
You did others.
50% the first.
Yeah,
meeting.
you would switch back and forth. I'm like, Brian, pick a lane.
Yeah.
Come on. Okay.
That staff's approved the 3 million request that we had in to help cover the cost for this project. We had been leaning on more urban renewal funds if needed to cover the increase in cost, but staff approved it, so. that
Great.
helps us out with that.
Excellent. Thank you for the update.
Any questions on the Gilchrist?
I think it's a great.
Action shot.
It's a big pipe.
I'm gonna tell you that I mistakenly went down the Gilchrist. They were doing a good job with managing the traffic, but it's clear as that gets built, I might want to change my
Avoid the
route.
area?
Yes, avoid the area.
Consider alternate routes if you have the opportunity.
Same with Union Street right now.
Is that right?
Not viable.
And I'll keep that.
Yeah. closed for a while.
Looks good though.
It's a good thing.
And Howard motivates the children.
Oh, is it? Not anymore.
Actually, there's a lovely white track coming. Somebody crossed the,
Oh, God.
the bike lane. And there's, you can see where Howard is. Family's going over.
You're not really serious. That's right.
That's why we put,
Those are
that's why we put up
suggestions.
3 of them.
Right.
So-
Road closed.
Who have the signs out?
Yeah.
Can't apply to me.
Not if it's in between a parent and a child.
What else you got, Alan?
That's it for McGilchrist. I think we're ready to move on.
Okay.
To Silverton Road update, and I'll go ahead and turn this one over to Karen Edelman to lead the discussion.
Thank you. So Silverton Road, which is a bond pavement R&R project, we chatted just briefly about this last meeting. Coming back with a little bit more information. So if you recall, Silverton Road's a pretty complex project. It's got the bond R&R component. It's got improvements at 17th at Silverton, which are URA funded, and then there was the candidate projects from the sidewalk and the ped crossing buckets. And then there's the CIPP sanitary sewer project that Alan mentioned earlier that adjusted the time frame as well. So circling back to the conversation of the road diet. So we looked at the concept of restriping Silverton Road from the existing 4-lane section down to a 3-lane section. And we shared last time that that does work. And again, reiterating, it does work from a traffic perspective. Scott from DKS was the one that assisted with that. So this is just kind of a map reminding us of the area. And the red piece there, as a reminder, that's a chunk that was not included in the current bond because that piece got paved as part of the 08 bond. I guess we're highlighting that because in order to do the road diet, it's a segment that's really outside of the project limits.
So the road diet will stop at Williams.
Yes and no.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Not if I don't even.
Yes and no, maybe not. All right, I think that's clear.
How's that for how's that for
Can I add maybe yes?
I'm trying to find money.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just jump ahead to the next slides, touching on where we're headed there. So this is, again, kind of talking about what we just said. I think we shared something similar to this last time, but so the intent with the road diet would be to stay within the existing curb to curb width.
Right.
So the thing to point out here is it would be, there's some sections out there that are a little narrower than would be desired for a full 3-lane section with full-size bike lanes. So that unfortunately it squeezes those bike lanes and those sections down to 5 foot wide. Now there also are some sections that are plenty wide that allows for a full buffer as well. It's kind of a hodgepodge of widths.
Well, it's way better than this current situation.
Exactly. So so that's just kind of reiterating that and jump ahead more
It
slides.
seems like I don't know if you've looked at crash data out there, but I've been on the aftermath of several high-speed crashes out in that area in the recent months. It seems like I'm really hopeful that this road diet's really going to change the nature of speed out there because seems like there's been a lot of
Yeah, the
crashes.
implementation of the road that will slow the speeds considerably.
Yeah.
Out there. And that's one of the problems with the 2-lane, trying to pass.
Exactly.
Which within no left turn lane, there's a lot of rear end.
Exactly.
That's probably what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think one other important point, excuse me, Aaron, is even though we're staying within the same footprint of the road, there is some cost associated with this, and that's primarily at the signals because of the lane configuration changes. So those, wherever there's a signal, those signals need to be modified. So that is where the cost add from the road diet comes from primarily.
Okay.
Can you elaborate when you said that signals need to be modified? Are you having to add a left-hand turn or are you, what's being modified?
Well, and Scott, maybe you can help me on this one.
So the signal heads, because of the left turn lane, we'll have new left turn phasing of the signal. So
Okay.
that's part of it. But also by doing this, we're gonna have to do AD upgrades and make sure that the push buttons are accessible on all the corners with this existing signal.
That leads to another question. With this having bike lanes, will you have a button that bikes can easily press?
There'll be bicycle detection. So
Okay.
they won't have
They
to
won't
push a
detect.
button, but they'll get detected.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Eric.
Will there be any green paint? I'm asking you for the counselor. Sorry.
Every day now, he's like, hey, Virginia Green, touch the green paint. It's going great, Mayor.
Awesome.
It's going great.
Awesome.
So this slide's essentially circling back to your question. So
About green paint or the
the,
different question?
the one
Oh, okay.
just before that. So as we kind of mentioned on the first overview, that it's a complex funding source, right? It's not just the bond piece. So maybe jump to the second bullet first. So by doing the road diet, it reduces the width needed at the intersection improvement of Silverton and 17th. So one of the intents of that project was to add the left turn lane to help with safety and help the things we just talked about. Once you do the road diet, you kind of naturally get that left turn lane. There's still a need to improve that intersection, but it would generate essentially about a $2 million savings
Sweet.
at that intersection. However, that's URA money, which needs to stay within that boundary. And also, usually their money is not used for maintenance activities, either pavement rehab, which is the bond piece of it. So kind of jumping maybe back up to the first bullet. So the additional costs that come with doing the road diet and the signal needs to accommodate the road diet, and as well as the inflation that we're seeing, unfortunately, it looks like we're about 2 million over the other components to get the road diet piece of it. And that does not include an additional 530 for the piece in the middle that's not a part of the bond project.
That's the 530 I'm trying to find, Mayor.
530 for paint? Oh, and signal. Okay.
Signal, yeah. So that piece goes through the Lansing signal.
Gotcha.
Which is it's also a school process.
Yes.
in Washington.
Yes, I'm very familiar.
So obviously a shortfall there. So our recommendation would be that we do the Silverton at 17th intersection. And that widening in that area, we would do it in a manner that would get the full buffer and the right width. Do that, complete the pavement R&R work from the bond along with the road diet from 17th to Williams, which was the end of that bigger segment on the west end, which would also include all those separate funding sources like the two-ped crossings, the sidewalk work, sanitary work, and then design and bid the remaining pieces continuing to the east as additive alternates to the project. If there's cost savings, we'd be able to add them in as the money allowed.
And that's the restriping and the signal work. That's what you're talking about?
And the paving from Beacon to Fisher.
Oh, the paving. Okay.
So yesterday I was asking you a question about, I understand the complexities of the URA and what it can and cannot buy. But my question was, if we're repaving and we're restriping to a new street design, keyword being new stuff. So can we, in that section where it touches the URA, can that street upgrade with the new design, can that be covered by the URA?
That's a Josh question.
We've tried
It's a
that a
legal
lot,
question.
Oh.
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. It doesn't pass legal counsel.
We can double check.
Yeah, we didn't get that answer since yesterday.
Maybe with a new formulation of the question. Sometimes you just gotta ask the question the right way.
I mean, it's interesting because it reduces capacity, so we'll see.
It is the 30-year plan, right, for that road. I would think that this would qualify for getting that new design built. That's my hope. I'm a very hopeful person.
Scott, when you did the analysis, was that for 30 years or was that for lesser time period?
We did it 20 year, we did it 20-year horizon.
Right, 20 years.
And could you talk about, because I know a little bit about road diets. You said it reduces capacity. Does it reduce, I mean, it changes the lane configuration, but does it reduce the capacity?
It does very slight reduction of capacity by going from.
Improves safety, but reduces capacity.
Exactly, yeah.
And improves capacity for people biking. Right? Yeah.
Right.
because there's nothing right now. You're either on the sidewalk or in the traffic lane.
Can somebody remind me what the speed is out there? No,
It's either 35 or.
I think it varies.
It varies, but I think it's 35 and 40.
Yes,
35.
that's my
recommendation.
yeah.
I think it's
But
35
then it
and
would
40.
reduce, if it's near the school, then it would reduce the school speed.
During the, yes, it's 20 mile per hour during school times in the vicinity of Lansing.
Would you mind going back to the, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question, Aaron, about the funding. So does any of the 2 million in savings from the URA, can that cover any of the bond work there? Because I think what I'm hearing is you're 2 million over budget, even without the additive alternates, as far as bond funds go, unless we can backfill some of the URA to cover that 2 million. Do you know if there's any?
I guess I'll clarify that. We don't have a pavement designer report yet. We're still waiting on that from the consultants. So that's assuming what we think we know to go back for the grind and then lay on the asphalt, which is the majority of the cost for that bond piece. So that could fluctuate.
I think that's a good question, Brian.
Yeah, and the other question I have is, from the utility side, if we were just gonna go take care of that utility without this project, that utility would pay for part of the payment.
The CIPP is.
Oh, you're
we'll
doing
have-
CIPP.
Yeah, it's got some minor trenching of bypass pipe, but it's
Okay,
not a full.
nothing significant.
Yeah,
Sorry, what's the idea?
cured in place. So we're reusing the existing pipe. We're basically lining it, but it's a
Okay.
large trunk main and we'll have to bury some of the temporary bypass piping. That's why we're trying to get it out in front of the bond project.
What is,
It's really a liner that goes within the pipe, so you don't have to open the roadway after replace.
oh, okay.
You can kind of go in at a manhole and.
And then, and through a manhole. Oh, wow, that's cool.
You have to never close out.
I see, yes.
So that's fine.
Bye. Okay, thank you
Okay,
for
I'm still
explaining
looking
that.
at the iPad.
Where do we bypass? Thank you very much.
Do you mind going back to the map? So I just wanted to,
One
more. I just kind of wanted to give kind of the thinking behind our recommendation there, which is, one, we're still, as Aaron kind of alluded to, we're still at a very early phase in the design, right? So there's a lot of unknowns to sort of figure out as we go forward here. But there's an opportunity to have a really comprehensive project if somehow we were able to fund all of these elements all the way through to Fisher to really change this road corridor.
Yeah.
That would be great if we can figure it out. And so that's why we're saying, let's keep designing that way and give ourselves the flexibility with the bid to find ways to fund those gap pieces. Or maybe, as we refine the design and the construction market cools off a little bit, we start to see things get a little more affordable. I don't think they're going to get 2 million more affordable, but we might get some ease there. And in the meantime, we have a base project that is still really good. Still creating a lot of that same benefit to William Street. And we have design, if for whatever reason we can't afford the rest, we have design there to look at, for future projects, future bonds, future grants. That's the reason behind our recommendation. I think we're just looking for general agreement at this point, and then we would continue forward and report back to you.
Is there any potential for safe crossings at that Lansing crossing? Is there any, could lose any of that money?
So just back from Lansing at the Sedona, that's the
Right.
safer routes to school crossing.
But if that's I think that the Lansing intersection is a school crossing as well. It's literally a school crossing currently. I mean, isn't it?
Guard out there.
Right, like you see the person with the flag and the yellow vest. I mean, isn't there a way, is there a way to put some of that money to upgrade the safety of that intersection and that crossing for students? Because Keith and I and Counselor Gonzalez did the walk to school out there a few months ago. And I mean, it's a lot of kids and it's a busy traffic area. We were right at that intersection. I mean, there's a lot going on with a lot of unsafe feelings. I mean, in my opinion.
The safe route
Yeah,
there. Is
sure.
that clear?
Yeah, go for it, Scott.
Did we
One-
bring the giant map?
We do.
We won't roll it out, but maybe afterwards you should turn it out. It's actually really.
One thing in the safe routes to school plan, they identified, and there's a lot of students actually crossing right here because Sedona comes over and connects to
Okay.
Washington. So we're actually, part of the design is what Alan mentioned, as we go to Williams, there is going to be a median and a crossing
Okay.
for the
Great.
school children there. And there's already a signal at Lansing and a crossing, there, so
Right.
it is already signalized today. And that's why they didn't, in that safe routes to school plan, they didn't identify anything new. This is where at Sedona, the ADA crossing, the median, and the RFB is identified as that.
Is there gonna be a light there?
Yes. I'm not sure. And
Cause I can't
it's gonna be
imagine
enhanced crossing.
those
and that's
grade
being
school
looked at.
kids crossing Silverton Road without some sort of signal. I mean, that's a nightmare scenario in my mind.
It was scoped through ODOT as just an RFB, but that was before the road diet concept, right? So we're going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes now. So we're still evaluating it. The thought is you put in the island now in the left turn lane if you do the road diet.
Yeah.
And then also probably still do the RFBs.
Okay,
For that volume. Yeah. We're still working
Okay.
through that detail, right? It's a change.
okay,
And we'll have to run that through ODOT as well.
of course.
To your larger question, I mean, whether it's Lansing or other areas, we can speak with Julie and Hanson and look for. Didn't mean to dunk up the boss.
Totally jumped on Brian.
And look for opportunities to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, are there other pots of money that we could be adding to this project? Because all of those elements are part of this project.
Question at Sedona, where if I'm saying this right, that's where just the intersection is, not the new crossing. Or did I
No,
get
there'll
those
be a new
backwards?
crossing.
Okay, what's this one then?
Lansing.
Thank you. At Lansing, if we have intersection upgrades with the road diet, would the safe routes to school pitch in for the upgrades to that intersection?
That's what I was trying to suggest.
Okay, is that, we're all on the same page? I'm just saying it differently in my head? Yes.
We'd have to go back and through another round of grants and request it, right? I mean, it's,
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
yeah. And yeah, that timeline might not align with
Sure.
what we're showing, you know, on the schedule. Yeah.
And then farther down, in the section to the west, in front of the health department there, we're looking at putting in a crosswalk there, and Chariots is looking at moving their, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that was identified as a need, and that was one of the candidates, one we previously brought to the group. We were looking to fund that out of the safer crossing bucket, and that was the one that UD stepped up and said they would fund that. So that's a UD funded piece that will get installed as a part of it.
Because that's where all of the county's behavioral health services are, is right at that location.
Correct.
So I think it's a high transit use.
It is. There's a shelter already on the north side, and Francis has told us that if we put the crossing in, they'll move their stop. Yeah,
So where, can you show on that where that
it's,
is?
It's this little building here. with-
Okay, great,
And this
thank
is
you.
the bus stop with a shelter, and I think this is the one they put back.
Oh, gotcha, okay. I'm also wondering, Courtney, if maybe if this is, we can articulate something on our federal agenda for the remainder of this, push all the way to Fisher, like
Yeah.
to complete a corridor, you know what I mean? I think that there might be something we could articulate there somehow.
And I think the idea of designing it through that
Yeah.
is gonna help us.
Exactly.
Because we'll be able to quantify specifically, not to your level of specificity, but we'll be able to get some estimate of
Because
the
it'd be
cost.
kind of a shovel-ready
And
project.
we have a match,
Yeah, yeah,
our own investment.
yeah. I think it could be really attractive for that kind of project. Well,
We're asking for money.
we're finding ways to ask for money.
One thing we want to be careful of,
Yeah.
hate to be the wet one, but we want to be careful of is federalizing the whole project, right? So that could create complications with the design firms that we've already hired and everything else using our own process and not a federal process. So
Gotcha.
we are matching it with our own efforts, but keeping it a standalone project if it's going to be federal funds would
Gotcha.
probably be the wisest way.
Which would be, I think would be significant. Yeah.
But the state legislation, right, is
Yeah.
gonna be focusing on transportation
Yeah,
in the next long session,
25.
and we could like become giant cheerleaders.
I don't know all the sources. I wonder if some of them that we would be applying for from the state, either from the state or whatever, but we still have the federal.
There are state transportation funds.
But we could aim it at.
And it goes far beyond just hiring a consultant, it's all environmental assessment.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. Understood.
Sorry, we'll be careful in our cheerleading, okay?
Be careful inviting them.
Okay. Where are we going?
I think unless there's other questions about this, we're ready to jump to Union Street.
Are we good
I
on?
just want to say, I think this is great. I think it sets us up to make the rest of the corridor.
Exactly.
We will not.
I would love it
Pursue
to not
additional
just
funding.
consider it, just, sorry to interrupt you. I would like to consider the corridor all the way to Corden Road ultimately, but really, I mean, Fisher is great, but to Lancaster would be amazing. And then all the way through, I mean, I know that becomes county at some point, but maybe there's a way to partner with them because that's a really critical corridor.
When is Fisher Road gonna be done? Because that is also connected to this whole project, right? I mean, like, if we can get to Fisher Road, that then unlocks
Right.
the improvements on Fisher Road.
Right.
And I'm all about hitting those little spots.
It's the second one on your schedule. It's
First page, and this is a little further back
Second road down, second one down.
Okay.
in our sequence, construction and 2930.
It shows design starting in 2025. What that really means is in about 6 to 7 months, we'll be putting an RFP out to start the process to hire a consulting firm. So
Okay.
it's coming soon.
That's exciting.
So you said, Alan, we're on to what, Union Street? Okay.
Take it away, Aaron.
All right. So again, I think we touched on this briefly several previous meetings. So after some input and some great ideas, we've reconsidered what kind of the bigger concept was, I guess. So this, I see a couple folks this is a handout. If you want to jump to it, there's a bigger picture behind the schedule. So this first slide is really talking about the chunk of Union between Summer and Capitol. So we've reconfigured what that block looks like. This configuration will take away the parking. Unfortunately, it will impact one tree that exists in the median because we're narrowing the median on the west end there. Basically, the old concept brought the bike lanes that are on the piece that's being built to the west side of Summer there. It brought them across diagonally, across the Summer intersection, and then had two-way bike traffic on the south side of Union, and that continued on down and around the curve. So this keeps the bike traffic separated on each side. And you'll kind of see on the next slide how that interacts, around the curve. And well, you can see it on your handout as well. So this is the first one. We also consulted with fire. They like this because it gives them more space to be able to set up their aerial apparatus in case something bad goes wrong, right? In the other scenario, they didn't have as much space because of the parking. So they actually like these improvements a lot as well. So
this used to be a bike signal. How much did we originally plan for that bike signal at Summer?
I think we had about 400 on that. It was basically a full signal replacement. So we'll still need signal modifications and ADA work at the intersection, but not to the extent of that whole
So
signal.
just right, this still will have a bike signal because of the cycle track. So you're gonna have protected signal for the bike phases. For example, at Capitol Street, going westbound, the bike will have a green. The westbound vehicle traffic will actually be stopped. And you'll have a no right turn on red sign that will light up because we want to protect the cycle traffic through there. So there's still a bike signal, it just won't be a diagonal.
Okay. Yep.
Similar to out on the drone.
Okay.
So that's that block. I want to jump to the next slide. This kind of, can't really see it. This brings you around the curve and around down to Marion. So the big change to point out here is again, the separated bike facility on each side. But what we did, and we're still looking at this based on some new ideas that just surfaced. But what we did is we've extended the improvements on down to Center Street, and we're taking that median, shifting it over, shifting the traffic to start the bike lane. That may change again.
So one of the ways that we've been advertising this family-friendly bikeway is that it's the connector to the 12th Street.
Correct.
Where is that? Like, where do you actually do that in a really nice way?
It would be the crossing there at Marion.
So you don't.
Well, the problem is the railroad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to like kind of whistle as we walk by, like, don't look over here, we're doing this really cool thing.
So basically, you're gonna stop, you're gonna get in the crosswalk
Yeah,
or whatever, however you choose to make that left-hand turn,
correct.
take on the traffic or do it as a pedestrian.
And the fear is if we change the crossing use by putting something dedicated to the bikes, it would trigger something with the railroad that would grow into more than just.
Because I was hoping for something more akin to what we have at Chemeketa. You know, with an actual bike accommodation across the
Yeah.
tracks.
I mean, Rick, do you want to talk about the?
Yeah, part of the reason we were able to get the railroad to agree to this stuff at Chemeketa is that we eliminated one of the through lanes going across, right? So there's only bikes coming.
Right.
So they are big at crossing elimination right now,
Right.
but at the same time, they are also big at shifting all of their future maintenance costs onto any of the agencies. So they don't call these signals their crossings anymore. They call them, when we meet with them now, they say the city's crossings of all this type of stuff. So there, if we touch anything, one, it's probably going to cascade farther down the corridor because all the crossings are interconnected down through there. And it's going to domino into the millions. We had a similar conversation with the Mill Street crossing that ODOT was 100% paying for down near the Amtrak station. And what ended up happening there is they wanted us to take on all future costs and maintenance for that crossing, which, I mean, in perpetuity. It wasn't just a $100,000 crossing fee or whatever. It was in perpetuity, which we couldn't afford.
Can we
So-
charge them like an operations fee for going through our city?
I-
I'm being serious.
No, the railroad has a lot of special privileges.
Goes
that we
way
just don't
back.
have. I mean, they kind of joke that God created the world and then they created the railroad, and it's
Yeah.
about that.
It's still that.
They have more power than Congress in some ways. I mean,
Pretty
it's
much.
kind of crazy.
So if getting people over to the promenade obviously is a great
Mhm.
connecting point through there. It's just we gotta be super careful on how we do it, so you don't mess ourselves up.
And we don't disagree with the idea.
Yeah,
It's
we-
just-
And they typically have right of way 30 feet on either side of the track. So we are trying to stay away from that 30 feet from the track so that we don't trigger anything. I say we, like I'm part of this design team.
I think we all understand the situation.
And Mayor, the one thing that we also don't want to mess up is we have the quiet zone all the way through there.
Right.
And that's, I mean, there's just so many different things that
Yeah.
are there, so.
Okay. I'm hoping that at some point we can actually develop a really connected, because this is super clunky.
Yeah.
And not what I was hoping for.
So yeah, so that's where we're headed. Like I said, there was some changes suggested that we're going to continue looking into, not in a bad way. So this may, again, tweak ever so slightly, mainly between the Marion and Center intersection, but
Yeah.
we're gonna dig into that and see what we can come up with.
I'm trying to find that 530,000 so that we can shuffle and read the needs in other areas too.
But overall, this is, well, I guess there's one more slide. So based on that idea, we looked at it, we re-estimated it. Basically, we determined we can shuffle the signal improvements from that diagonal crossing to the other signal needs that were generated. And we think we can essentially stay within the bond budget. We'll continue looking at that and see if we can
So
do
the
more.
current work that we are doing on Union Street, I think that's like 4 or 5 blocks, something like that. Big expansion.
Ish.
Well,
But
I guess it's-
considerably less expensive than 4.3 million. So is it just inflation that's causing it? Is it the center medium that we're having to alter that creates that? Is it the right of way that we're trying to figure out who the heck owns it that we're trying to buy?
I think it's a combination of all that.
Where's the right of way that's in question?
It's that, pretty much that whole curve, all the way from Capitol around to Marion.
Pretty funny.
And that, a lot of that stems, so that's the old railroad, right? Hence the Union Street Railroad Bridge. So there's a vacation of that old and this end is looking rather complex. So we're
Okay.
still trying to unravel that. So that's that one. What do we got next? Anything else?
That's it on the
Yep.
transportation, it says. We are on to new projects, parks, paths and trails.
Maybe before we go on transportation, I've heard inflation mentioned a couple of times. Do we have any kind of big picture sense of where costs are? I mean, it isn't just these projects, but other projects that we'll be facing. I don't know if you can say anything more about it now or later, but just to have a sense of how much that's driving what's going on.
We did just open a bid. I don't think we've seen prices really come down. The Buffer Pipeline.
They haven't come down from what originally were estimated on things, no.
So we're still holding at that higher level.
Our two most recent data points were like big transportation improvements on the Gilchrist and Second Street over in West Salem. And I don't think that we saw, I mean, we talked about where we thought the costs were with McGilchrist with this group, and they came in just about there. And I don't think we saw any real relaxation with Second Street. But we don't have a ton of data points, so some of these first projects will help us figure that out. We can dig up some more comparisons though, and bring back a report to this group.
I think that would be helpful to understand, you know, so we're seeing how far our money's gonna go compared to what we anticipated.
Yeah.
That would be, I think that would be a good update for next meeting.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'll kick this one off and then Aaron Kimsey's, because I only travel with engineers named Aaron.
Right.
He's going to talk about parks, paths, and trails. And I think what we wanted to do with this topic for you all today is just kind of introduce it. You did lots of hard work on the transportation bucket criteria, and so I think we're kind of hoping to piggyback on that. And we want to make sure that, I guess the questions we want to ask you all are, do you want to use essentially a very similar process with the recognition that parks aren't exactly like transportation facilities, so we need to discuss how we're going to differentiate between the two. Do we want to use a consistent equity tool like we're using for the transportation projects, or think about parks a little differently from that standpoint? And I think that's really some of the big picture things we want to talk about here. Not necessarily solve them today, but at least kind of get your thoughts and kind of give you an overview of where the program could go, and then we'll pick it up again at our next meeting.
Well, where I'm coming from is I want to create as much consistency as possible. And I like the idea of using equity and the same model that we have, kind of carrying it forward. I mean, honestly, my earlier question about when I heard that Riverfront Park got bumped up on the priority list, like I bristled immediately because, yeah, like we need more assets at Riverfront Park, right? When I live out in parks that are, you know, not anywhere near that level of funding and attention. And so I definitely think that having that equity piece is really critical just for our, you know, for all parts of our city.
Okay. And I think that's kind of what we were thinking, but we just want to make sure,
Yeah.
and again, you know, recognizing that there's some differences, make sure that we
Sure.
talk about all those things. Go ahead, Aaron.
Others.
Yeah, so this slide here just represents what you all agreed to for criteria, and I'm not sure if you guys weighed on the percentages, but essentially how we came to, you know, scoring each of those sidewalk replacement projects. That's kind of, I wanted to have a reminder. And so going to the next slide, on the right is what staff has come up with, some recommendations for potential criteria specifically for parks projects, paths and trails. We really wanted to, you know, one of the things we wanted to touch on is that, you know, we understand we want that equity piece. The current CIP tool that we've used for previous projects is kind of more wrapped around the need-based equity, and there's a lot of ways to define equity to different people. And so that was just, we wanted to point that out, that is a way we've done it, and we can continue to do it on parks and trails or paths and trails. But I think Brock had some good ideas on what other cities are doing, and so we just kind of wanted to broach that topic. And so we can dive into that here in a sec. But
Can I interrupt you for
yeah,
1 second?
absolutely.
Just for our non-council members, just so you know, the council did unanimously approve the other tool on Monday night. So there is at this point broad support for that concept. So I think that's important to know as we're considering this. So
Park classification function is basically exactly what that is, just, is it a neighborhood park? What is it, how does it function, how does it serve, the community in that area? Park utilization is how many folks, are accessing that park from like is it a 1/4 mile radius, is it a 3 mile radius? Am I saying that right?
But if it's an under-resourced park, people are not gonna be accessing it as much as one of the fancier
Well,
parks.
it's who,
Potential. I think.
potential, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Who
potential.
has the proximity to
Okay,
actually use it.
Thank you.
So, question about that,
Mm-hmm.
because I was thinking like, where is density taken into
Right.
consideration? Is this what that is trying to get at? Right, if it's a dense neighborhood, then it should score for that, because more people are gonna have the opportunity to use the park.
Yes, and I think this comes into play the most when it comes to neighborhood parks. So then they're throughout the city. Some neighborhood parks serve 1,000 residents, some neighborhood parks serve 3,000 residents.
Right.
The idea there is that the prioritization would be those who serve more people.
I'm thinking of our visit the other day to the park out in South Salem.
Gorgeous.
What's the name of the park?
Wendy Kroger.
Wendy Kroger Park. And interestingly, so just to your point, Robin, and maybe it takes this into consideration, but many of the students we met there had never been to their park, even though they live adjacent to it, or we're very close, because Liberty separates their house from this park. And so there can be big barriers that keep youth away from some of these. So I'm hoping that there's a way to sort of recognize that. Like I'm thinking out of my area, Lancaster, if you live on one side of it, you may not go to a park on the other side of it, or Commercial or Liberty, or, who knows? I just want to be mindful of that as we're looking at that catchment area. Sometimes we might, on the map, it might look like a catchment area, but in reality, there are barriers that really keep you from accessing it.
I wonder too about density that is there today versus density that may be in the same area. We're making investments in a 10-year program that are really designed to carry us, because we haven't done this before in this particular area of parks. I wonder if we should be thinking about the designated land use and what that might mean to the area in terms of a delta for population change, a delta for population growth. I think we should be considering that, because what we will be developing is massive multifamily.
Right.
And that will likely, in my limited expertise, is likely to be on the perimeter, because we can't afford development, can't afford to grow in the denser areas. So you're going to have a lot more, on the outside of our city. So that might change how we think about the park assets we have and what we want them to do for our.
Yeah, so bringing in a long range planner to really look at our Salem plan, where we've zoned things and the potential for densification.
And they're going to be all about housing.
Rob, the need-based equity tool that we have listed on here, is that tool you showed me before, where it talks about Market Street being that divider between people on the north side of Market? They're lacking a park, but the people on the south side are not.
Not exactly. The
Okay.
need-based equity component would essentially be, would be up to this track level. So we'd
Okay.
be looking at demographic information, environmental information. It gets more into kind of issues of environmental justice, about where we're prioritizing investments. When we get to park utilization, kind of the mayor's point, we do have another way that we model access, and we consider barrier streets.
Okay,
And that's more than what I've shared with
that's
you.
the map. Okay.
Yeah, so this is like, to the point about Wendy Kroger Park, we would agree that Liberty is a barrier. No one,
Right.
we don't expect anyone to cross that street to consider, to access the parks that would be reflected. in town hall.
Yeah.
Great.
I wanted to make sure that that map was a tool that we were still going to utilize, because I think that point that the mayor's making is really critical.
Yeah, these are all great comments. Connection to existing transportation systems, that was just something we came up with, maybe we want to look at how is there mass transit connections, or other, specific bikeways that are coming to a park. Revenue generation was another one that we thought we might want to consider. You have things like the Iron Man, softball at Wallace Marine Park, and there's things that come to the city that generate a lot of revenue and attention, and they're all really great things. And so some of those parks well, although they're not neighborhood parks, they do have some family paths and trails, and so we thought maybe we want to consider that as part of the scoring criteria. Accessibility and ADA, kind of just did it on there. Obviously, we want to create that. Some of that could be hit on by the hazard assessment, so maybe there's a little bit of kind of not double dipping, but there could be some things there. And then relationship to other projects, that's another one that we might want to consider, and that's really looking at other projects within the bond. So we do have other park projects like bathrooms and fields, playgrounds, like we talked about. And so the thought is, okay, we know we're going to be in this park doing other work. It would be a great opportunity to have that same contractor come in and do some of that work while we're there and really get kind of a cost-effective efficiency work. Otherwise, you know, you could just have a contractor jump around from park to park and remobilizing each time. So, and then obviously having assessment. So really just what's the condition, are there trip hazards, are people at risk of falling, and that kind of thing. So
Where did 45% come from?
so 45 came from the original slide from the sidewalks.
Sidewalks, okay.
So 25 and 45, I just threw on there because those are basically the same criteria, and we can adjust any of these as we feel. You know, we can decide let's use all of these, or let's thin them down, or maybe we're missing some that we think should be added, and then we can start talking about the weight and how much they should be.
So can we back up for 1 second, just to, so we're talking about path and trail replacement. We're not talking about creating new, this is strictly rehab
Right.
of existing assets. This isn't, so it's like the sidewalk repair.
Yes.
It's not infill.
It's not infill.
That's an important.
Is your, in the hazard assessment bucket, is it the same sort of criteria that you're looking at on the sidewalks? The same types of hazard, the same types of issues?
Yeah, I would think so. I'm not as familiar with the sidewalks, what you guys were looking at there, but as far as hazard assessment for the sidewalk replacements, what kind of?
So they're gonna measure the degree of different hazards, so offset between panel is set by inches, you know, and then spalling, surface spalling is set off of percent of panel, fracturing or missing on percent of panels, with traditional panels 5 by 5. What percent of that panel is spalled, and it's scale 1 to 10. So in the 10, you have 100% of the panel has surface spalling or is missing, and you know, and then we get that percentage. So 5 is the 50% of it.
So, sorry, so that's
That's ours. I do not know how
their
ours.
program. Actually, we have a slide here that shows, it's similar, but it shows how the criteria that the parks.
And is there a different criteria for trails? Because I'm assuming trails are unpaved.
I think we're talking about only paved.
Everything we're talking about here is either concrete or asphalt surface.
Okay, so
That
we're
was
not
my
talking
question,
about
because I was like,
anything
asphalt's in my head,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
concrete panel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are both.
There are both.
Okay.
It could be an equitable distance, right? You could, maybe not a panel, but
Sure.
per square foot.
Obviously.
Um,
Hold on 1 second.
I wanted to talk about the connections to existing transportation systems. That strikes me as a little amorphous. I think the real key, at least to me, is do they provide good connections to walking and cycling routes? Because I can think of places where I go in the city where, you know, I'm on the road for a while, and then the convenient route for me is through the park to get to where I'm going. So it would really be, I would hope you would be emphasizing paths that are playing that kind of role as opposed to.
I think that's kind of what we were thinking about when we came up with this, but there is another aspect of it too, which is good connections as a recreational destination, right?
Yes.
So if I want to get to Bito Brown because I want to go down to the dock, or those are a good continuous connection from the roadway to that is another way to look at it. But I think that was what I was thinking when we first threw this on the list, was augmenting our transportation network.
Yeah.
Like when you exit off of the Union Street Bridge, you know, you're using Wallace Marine
Right.
Park. And that's a major thoroughfare
You
for
bet.
people on bikes and people who are walking. I mean, it's like, so it's critical that those are perfect
It's a
examples.
little bit of a policy disconnect with that, right? I see Courtney cringing over it. But, yes.
Another question, how many of our parks are considered revenue generative?
the ones that get caught, funds really, right?
No,
No.
well,
Oversight can talk, I mean, anything that's revenue generator, reserve shelters, for example, or we reserve, so there's a variety, a preponderance of our parks actually have some ability for revenue, but obviously community and urban parks are greater at revenue generation, but at all of them, you know, we reserve sports fields, we reserve here, so there's open areas, there's amenities in the parks that are reservable, they're all generate stages.
So the opportunities there for pretty much every park, or I know opportunities are right. The ability for each park has potential for a revenue generation aspect to it, but
not so much.
They're not all
in
used.
favor.
I was gonna say less so in neighborhood
Yeah.
parks, although there are some neighborhood parks that do generate revenue because they have stages or things early on that were built that we don't typically put in neighborhood parks now. So, but less so in neighborhood parks than a community or urban.
just to me, it stood out as kind of like sort of odd duck in the criteria. That's why I asked the question.
It's
The
part of how the
CIP
bond,
criteria.
yeah, I was gonna say, it's part of how the bond projects were thought about was either we're fixing existing problems in parks or creating items that do give us some revenue, like shelters, for example. And so if we're doing that, then having a good pedestrian connection to that facility makes sense if we're gonna be charging folks. It's kind of, that's one of the things we were thinking. And then the event piece aspect.
Do we have a database of the hazard assessments?
Before.
Yes.
Next slide.
Well, but real quick, on the left,
Oh,
the
yeah.
text there, the bullets, that is essentially the same steps that were identified in the sidewalk plan. The one thing that we did remove, and we can put it back, but there was an initial outreach to the public to get kind of a list of ideas on where do you want, sidewalk replacements, or where do you want sidewalk infills. Because this is really a maintenance driven pot of money, and we already do have, we'll show on the next slide, a list of a database of what's kind of where it's bad and where it's better. We felt like we could essentially get rid of that first outreach, go ahead and once we get our criteria, score those parks against our criteria, and then go to the public and say, based on this approved criteria, we come up with these, and then get some feedback.
It does seem like we need to have an open process on some level, but I think that parks are so much, it's such a smaller finite thing that we actually manage. Like we have staff in them. Not that we don't manage our streets and sidewalks, but it's so massive that compared to the staffing level that there's no way we don't know what's happening on the sidewalk on any given street unless somebody tells us. But in parks, I think we probably, I'm guessing we have a better sense of what the issues and the needs are.
Exactly.
Because our staff is actually there routinely. But I do think it's still important to get the public input up front.
I wonder if we might consider the Parks Board a voice for that kind of input and whether or how you would want to have a stop there on this route.
Yeah, but certainly the SPRAB needs to be involved. in this.
What's great is that Nikki is on that as well as on this.
Right.
She could be a good area for us.
Yeah.
I would love to see her next.
Right. We're all on beta track. All right.
Next one.
You can see it great on my screen. I'm at my desk. So it's okay though. We don't need to read the fine print. Essentially, what you're seeing here is this is all the parks in the city, and we've gone out and evaluated. And we have assessment criteria at the top there.
And this is path assessment you're talking about, and
Yes.
you've got, okay, path or trail.
What is the difference between a path and a trail? Can you give us definitions or no?
That's a good question. Do we have I think like,
Interchange.
Yeah.
They're essentially interchangeable. That's because they're trails to be unpaved,
Right.
but I wouldn't define it that way for sure.
I feel like,
That would be a problem now. Okay, continue.
I think a lot of the paths at Minto are asphalt, and because of their location, they can be considered more of a trail based on just because you're in this natural area, but.
Well, if we're gonna use that, my sidewalks can be considered. They're asphalt. I mean, in my neighborhood. Oh, yeah. Very
So
old.
anyway, so park staff have gone out and there's some scoring criteria that are at the top there, and they're scoring those paths based on what they're seeing. And so we have, top of the list, there are some very poor paths or trails. And then it goes into the poor criteria and then fair and good and excellent. So I think a lot of the park names you'll see at the bottom of the list are newer parks, obviously, that are in better condition, but you can kind of get a sense that half of the parks either have a poor or very poor.
I'm surprised to see Wallace Marine in the poor.
Well,
I mean, I know there are certainly places that probably are, but there are certainly places that are excellent.
Right. Yeah, and this isn't saying that the
So-
entire park is very poor. There's are paths and trails in those parks that have very poor condition. So it's not a blanket, all of the trails or paths in this area.
Yeah, and
are bad.
Riverfront Park,
yeah, we got
really? That's,
Riverfront Wallace Marine.
I don't know if this is a red herring, and I apologize for what I'm about to say. Yet, I think some of the bigger community scale parks would be eligible for TOT
Right.
resources or other things. And so to me, it seems like some of the things we're identifying as very poor have a different fund source. So I would hate to use our bond funds for
right,
These
that's the
larger scale
conversation we had
parks.
earlier, yeah.
it feels to me like that might be something else to consider is whether we have a target park type for an investment where it would not necessarily be eligible for a TOT impact, because of the beautification impact or the community
Right.
engagement or the event possibility. It just feels to me like we're gonna do this great work, have this great list, but then we can take the things off the top and just put them in the TOT fund source or SPIT. Too.
Or maybe even URA in some cases,
Yeah,
possibly,
URA.
depending.
So
You're probably not gonna wanna hear what I'm gonna say right now, but instead of having a park level list, I think we need a path trail level list.
we
So
do-
we're not calling it like, oh, Wallace Marine Park, that's in poor shape, but like Trail A or whatever the name of it, you know what I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
in Wallace Marine Park. It's, I'm guessing there might be like one or two in some of these parks. And they might be very discreet and not such I mean, when I think of Wallace Marine Park, I'm like, oh, holy crap, that's a huge project. But it really might just be a small portion.
Yes.
Right, that's
So-
right.
Yeah, we do have a further distilled list that I don't have in the slide. It's pages that actually looks at specific locations within the Wallace. It actually has, it's a 10-foot wide path and the issues are 20 feet.
Yeah.
And then a square area, and then there's the next one, and then.
Great.
So we actually have all that on GIS.
Okay.
And so. Yeah, honestly, a lot of this work is really gonna be kind of hop, skip and jumping around. Like, we're not gonna go and say, we're gonna replace a mile of path here, right? Because 3/4 of it are in good shape.
Right.
But there's a panel here, and there's 2 panels here, and then there's 4 panels down there, and so it's really gonna kind of be really more of a maintenance effort where we go in and chunk it out.
I guess what I would, without getting too far into detail, because I know that Counselor Stapleton's job, I would like to see more project, like more trail level data rather than, so I have a better
Yeah.
concept of like, okay, how big is the problem in Wallace Marine Park? How big is the problem in Riverfront Park? Because, yeah, because right now it's hard for me to like say, oh, this doesn't help me a whole
Right.
lot.
Seems like what might help for the next meeting is to bring that GIS data for certain parks. I don't know that we want to give you all of them, but
Sure.
just to kind of get a sense for what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
I think that would be helpful till we understand the magnitude of the problem, because right now I don't have a good sense of it. I don't.
Have we costed how much the repair is? Like if you were to repair all of these, what the cost would be?
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I have not, no.
I think that would be interesting because you could figure out, hey, we can just take care of all of it with $4 million, or it'll only take care of 20%, and we have to pick and choose.
Right, and that's why knowing like which parts of the trail are a problem in which park, and we can know, and that's when we get into the equity and all those things, because maybe we want to rehab one trail in this park, but not all of them, because it's never used, or, you know.
Maybe you can afford to do all the very poor.
Right,
Right.
right, exactly.
I'd be curious, so one of the selection criteria is proximity to projects. So do we have this data cross-referenced with other parks that are already doing work? Whether it's playground repairs, sport courts, et cetera. It would make sense from a mobilization standpoint for contractor to come in and do both of those.
Yep.
So I understand that aspect of it, but I also want to talk about the fact that like we're really hyper focusing a lot of money on certain areas. And then what we're choosing to do, if we choose to do that, is not invest in some of these other smaller parks around town. And that needs to be a conscious decision that we make. And I'm not sure what the decision is to make there, but it's weighing on me. The more and more we have these conversations, we're talking about, keeping those sidewalk repairs and infills to main corridors and, all those different things. It's just, and I understand it, but at the same time, we're really pulling a lot of this money out of neighborhoods and local parks and like putting them in areas that are high traffic. And I get it. I understand the concept, but at the same time, I want to be careful.
That was some of the feedback we got on Monday night on the other tool, was that like, oh, did you put these through when you're doing this maximization process, did you put these through the tool? And the answer was no, because we didn't, because we're just trying to maximize dollars at that point, not looking at all of the great criteria.
And this would all be contracted work.
Is there any opportunity here for some green paint?
Wow.
Sorry, I just had to.
Not green paint. but
Saying the
some
quiet
of
part out loud, saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, some of these pads are in bad repair or disrepair because of adjacent trees and the roots and things.
Sure.
And so our urban forester has made a point to say, hey, we don't want to go start cutting down trees to save paths.
No.
So we're gonna probably look at, we will look at, are there alternative construction methods to try to create a ADA accessible path if we need it to be ADA, and then I'm gonna also save the tree or preserve the tree. So maybe it's a green.
I really just joking.
Well, like over
I know.
like over on D Street, I mean, I think that was a great example of building that sidewalk over there with with all of the things you're talking about in mind. They did a great job of looking at all those alternative construction.
Yeah, the city of
options.
Seattle is they're kind of the leader right now, at least in our area as far as coming up with some construction.
Great.
We'll be looking at that.
I will say on the D Street path, you cannot ride two bikes together on that. Me and Keith tried, it did not work. It's
Should be riding single file in the city anyway.
it should walk my bike.
I did want to add one more thing about when we are doing construction and kind of to the efficiency point, especially if we're going to a smaller park. It just makes sense to kind of knock out as many of the problems as we can while you've got a contractor.
Of course.
Larger parks could be different, right? Like you got a problem over here, problem over there. And we decide to sort of focus our attention on that line of the grain, then we have a little more flexibility. But just from an efficiency standpoint, I think that's something that ought to be considered as well.
So I think for next meeting, it would be helpful for this group to hear more of a little bit of a deeper dive on a select number of parks. Maybe not all of them.
In the very core, maybe top of the
Yeah. So we can get an idea of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I also heard at least an idea of how much of this problem we think we can solve with them.
Yeah. Yep.
And then I think we also want to start thinking about how we break down the scoring for the prioritization.
Yes.
So like this right here is only looking at one category that you had on your list.
Yeah, this would be the hazard assessment.
Right.
And then on this list, can we have if it's available for top funds or not?
Yes. I can get that to you.
That's pretty easy because there's only like 3, I think.
There's quite a few different areas that we
Oh, really?
allow. Yeah, there's 24 different
Parks?
locations, not necessarily parks,
Oh,
but
okay.
areas, signs, locations, different things. Mhm.
Okay.
And we do need to revisit that list because last time I got a question, Minto Brown Park is not actually on that list. It was from before the bridge was built and it wasn't a tourism generating park at that
Oh,
point.
because we did use top funds for a path over there.
We did, but it hasn't been used for the operation.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, you're right. Gear park, yes.
So I have one more slide. and
Okay.
It's a good segue to what we've been talking about. We have, similar to what you guys did for the R&R projects, you guys had identified some sidewalks that were adjacent within the limits that we thought, hey, let's take advantage of the construction, the opportunity, and knock out some of these projects early. They weren't weighed against the criteria, but the collective decision was, let's take appropriate action and try to be efficient with funding. We have a similar situation with the sidewalks in the park, specifically at 3 parks, Hoover, Sumter, and Highland.
Is a sidewalk in a park a sidewalk project or a park project?
It's a trail.
These are paths, sorry.
Oh, these are paths. Okay,
These are
because those
paths.
look like sidewalks to me, but okay.
These
Just
are
saying.
paths in parks. So we have 5 parks that have sports courts that are getting rehabilitated or reconstructed. And 3 of them are what's on the slide here. And they have, especially Hoover, has significant sidewalk path.
Gotcha.
And-
See, I told
I'm
you.
looking at this, it looks like a sidewalk.
Totally.
That are in really poor shape. And like we're literally, especially at Hoover, you are literally right there at the court is right there where these.
Brandon has a grinding method that'll take care of that problem in Hoover. You can just grind that down and it'll be fine.
The spalling you're seeing is at Sumter. And then Highland is another, it doesn't have as much sidewalk. There's probably a path, sorry. There are railroad trails.
Point made. Thank you.
Highland doesn't have as much, but it definitely, there's quite a few that look like that, what you see on the screen. And so, and I just wanted to point out that all 3 of those are really close to being considered very poor, actually, on the scale for hazard assessment. I would like to propose that we consider these 3 parks as opportunities to pull some of the funding away early, so that we have a designer on board right now who's ready to design these improvements. So if we could take advantage of that, that would be great.
So it seems like part of what we need to bring back to you all, along with how far our money will go, is what this will be out of that.
Right. So we get a scope of like, what's the trade-off?
Yeah, how much are you giving?
Yeah.
And could we also get the equity score on these? Because I think I think we could pull that out right away, even without any, if we haven't decided on the other metrics, I think we could find out the equity score on this.
I feel like you could pull equity and hazard assessment pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then, I mean,
And that's
if we
7%.
go the same weight criteria as the sidewalks, you're only talking about the other criteria is only 30%.
Right.
So.
And you see opportunities for cost savings with bundling this with the
Yes,
sports court.
absolutely. Yeah, the contractor will be mobilized. They'll have the equipment, they'll have the studs, everything.
And they do that same, they'll do both kinds of work.
Could you do it as an additive? I mean,
Yeah.
including design and then have it as an option, just like we've been talking about earlier.
And one more thought on the criteria. We listed all 6 of those, but we don't have to use them. It's really, I think, what we're looking for from the committee is what do you all think of the differentiators ought to be beyond equity and the actual condition. Kind of like we talked about with the transportation project.
So maybe if we give you some feedback on that now,
Yeah.
you'll come back with a recommendation
Yeah, I
next
think
time,
that's
and
right,
then
and
we
then-
can respond to that recommendation. So just group of thoughts?
Okay, what is, oh, yeah.
I want to give folks time to talk.
Yeah, I'm
I feel
just,
like I talk a lot.
I think first of all, are these the right categories? Yes or no? And then if so, how do you rank them in terms of importance?
Utilization and accessibility, ADA accessibility, and the relationship to the other projects, kind of the 3 outside of need-based and hazard assessment that stand out to me.
Okay.
Yeah, the future utilization or what Courtney was talking about future planning, I think that's really, really important.
Agreed.
And I do like what we were talking about, connection to all different types of transportation, whether that's walking, biking, and public transportation, because I know that also reflects ADA, because I know a lot of folks who want to access a park are going to use public transportation or have those needs. It's less important for me personally, the revenue generator, but that's just because I'm feeling that strain of we're getting pulled into those few parks.
Yep.
And I want to make sure this spreads out, but that's just me.
I agree with that. I think I agree with that. This is a community bond. I mean, I understand the reason why we want to maximize the revenue generating parks. I get it, but I want this to be community-wide, not so much focused on the traditional parks that get everything.
No, I would even weigh that against my need to do things to maximize it. Like, I don't know how you feel about that, Chris, but for me, I'm even feeling that pull there. Like, I get it in my common sense brain, that really makes sense, but at the same time, I'm really feeling that pull towards spreading it out on this.
I tend to agree. I think if there's a significant savings, we need to do it. But I think if we're nickel and diming it, that's not enough for me to override the spreading it to the parties.
I would be really interested to hear what the Parks Board has to say about that.
Yeah. It might be good to get their input on this. I don't know if you guys could maybe do a presentation to them. I mean, they are our advisory board. Seems like we should ask them for their advice. Cool.
One thought that occurred to me when you were talking about that, and I mean, there is a way to structure this criteria with just using park classification, saying we're going to give neighborhood parks the highest weight.
Yeah.
And to kind of do it the reverse of what we did with transportation facilities, where there's a conscious decision that we want to spread this out to the smaller facilities.
Yeah.
Just something to think about.
Yeah.
We'll kind of throw that into the mix.
Cool. Bob, did you have thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, I was just thinking, I like the utilization criteria, because there are small parts, some small parts that they have high need, but really low use potential.
Between those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any other aspect of this that the Parks Board even could help a lot with? Because I know sometimes our boards don't feel like they're doing anything, they're kind of just sitting, and this is, to me, a really great opportunity to utilize those.
I think it would be great if you just gave the whole parks part of this presentation to them. If you could go present to them and help them bring them up to speed so they understand what's going on and ask their advice on this part. And if they have other thoughts, I think that'd be great. Yeah.
I think we know what we need to bring back.
Cool. That looks like the last thing on our agenda. Do we have anything else that we didn't discuss?
Oh, yeah, there is
One more
one.
slide.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Ryan's favorite.
Oh, yeah.
So this is just a quick update on potential project notification signs. I guess what I'll say is I think we've landed on this design concept in kind of in general, but we're looking at color selection, size of font, so we can make sure that people can see it as they drive past it. These primarily will be like a 4x4 sign.
4x4.
48 inches by 48 inches for transportation projects mainly. 4 feet by 4 feet. But we'll have smaller signs as appropriate for parks projects and other projects that maybe don't need as large a sign. I'll give you the background on why. Do you want me to share the background on Trevor's? Sure. Okay. So up at the top, the banner is kind of the approved bond measure part that we've used. It's on our letterhead, it's on our website, everywhere that we talk about the bond. And so the concept is where you have a park project, the tree or representative park project, that you would have that color of sign for that project. If you have a green sign that's, it's a a sidewalk or a bike type project, and kind of it goes down the list. I have some concerns with that. One of them is, with the 08 bond measure, we just had one consistent sign, and we were able to reuse those signs for all the projects for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so we could still do that, but it would limit which ones we can reuse and how we reuse them.
I love the idea of color-coded signs, but I don't think it's practical.
Practical, yeah. And I don't know how many people actually see that yellow. And so
It's going to be 100% lost on everybody except the people in this room.
You are really close to that. You would know.
Yeah.
I didn't see it the first time I saw it.
Yeah. No, I
so
think,
anyhow, we've got our sign, our sign crew specialize in making signs on a daily basis, looking at different colors. I think something that pops would be really great.
the one on the left to me pops the most.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
But I think we should go with one sign, scale it to size based on the project. And I don't think the color coding is a great idea, but I don't think we're there. Let's just make it.
Is there a reason the thank you isn't bigger?
I think all the font's gonna get bigger, but yeah, we can certainly take that feedback in the letter.
Seems like you have a lot of space up in that colored area. You could make that, thank you, say a
Yeah,
lot bigger.
I mean, I noticed right away that safety and livability is too skinny, especially if you're driving by.
It's super.
Yeah.
Or we say it twice. I don't
Can we
know.
say it twice?
Yeah.
Can I talk to you later, Erin?
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-oh.
there's some ideas.
I'm making the phone number a little bit smaller, so nobody can see that.
Which part?
The phone number?
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, the poor people at dispatch are gonna be like, I have no information. Why are you calling me?
Question. This is for temporary signs while the work is due.
Yes.
Is there anything that we can put on projects that is permanent?
Like a plaque. or
Like a
something.
plaque, right? Like,
When we build something probably, but probably not improvements. Like I would
Put a
think,
literal brand in the street.
yeah, or like on the sidewalk.
The manhole covers.
Dude, I'm working on that. I'm just wondering.
the worker access covers.
Sorry.
That's
Metal
my-
circles.
I would love to.
Do we have
see
anything else?
I know.
December 7th, the chamber is hosting a public policy forum at 7 a.m. on the bond. And thank you to Mike Karen for suggesting it, because we're looking at a contractor focus, trying to entice local contractors into
Cool.
the bond projects that are coming. We think that we might need to do at least 2 of these things, one with the chamber as the audience, and a little bit of accountability on how we're doing. There's a lot going on that we haven't, I mean, we've talked about, but we haven't, I don't think, gotten everyone's attention about how well the first bond sale went, how we've already purchased all the fire stuff. You know, there's just a lot of big
And
sort of messages.
our tax rate is lower than projected.
Yes, exactly. And we got a premium. So I think there's a lot to share that may not have been heard already. And it's also an opportunity to attract a contractor base and show the schedule about when we should be
Gotcha.
aware of upcoming things. So Lena Prine and I are working on that for December 7th. And then Alan and I were talking about how we probably need to do specific outreach with Latino Business Alliance and the Capital Connection Group to try to raise additional awareness out in the contractor community. Not one and done, it needs to be done a lot.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Mike, for thinking about that. I think that's
Yeah.
really, like, we always talk about, like, let's highlight what the city is doing, but there's areas where we're blindsided, and so thanks for bringing that up. It's a great opportunity, I think.
Anything else for the group? We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.